In this video, I'm going to share how I work 100 hours a week without burning out. Because I've been doing exactly that for the past 6 years, not taking a single day off, even on days when I've had surgery or been sick. And I think it is the single biggest reason why I've been able to go from unknown high school dropout to now on the other side, 7 years later, being the co-founder and CEO of a company with tens of millions of dollars in revenue that was recently valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. There's 3 parts to my system that we'll cover: mindset, environment design, and habits. But before we get started, I need to give you a disclaimer because this video will probably get me canceled. My lifestyle seems to be very controversial, but these things have been so life-changing to me that I felt if it helps even one person through sharing these things, that it will be worth it, even if it ends up angering a lot more people. So here's the disclaimer for you. First, I am not making this video to brag or to judge anybody that doesn't work 100 hours a week like I do. My lifestyle has been extremely painful in many ways, which I'll be the first to admit and share with you. And I've had to sacrifice my teenage years and my early 20s to get here. I also know that I still have a long way to go in making myself better and in building my business. And I've been blessed with privileges and advantages that I am very aware of and grateful for, and I'll cover in this video. Let's dive right into it, starting with part 1, creating a champion mindset. I define mindset as the choices we make about how we see the world. And we're starting there because mindset is the foundation of being super productive and avoiding burnout. Without the right mindset, I don't think it's possible to have the discipline to do these things in this video every single day. But with it, they become like second nature. And there's a few big lies that we have to start with about work, which prevent the right mindset. The first big lie is that if you work super hard nonstop, burnout is inevitable. It's just going to happen. We're told this by everybody, but I am living proof that this is not true. Burnout is a scam, and the psychology behind it is really interesting. There's this great book called The Upside of Stress, where this researcher from Stanford goes through and studies whether stress is damaging to health, as we're all told to believe, and she finds something very interesting. Her research proves that people who believe stress to be bad really do get the negative health effects of stress, but that people who believe stress to be good, a challenge to rise to and a way to grow, actually don't experience those negative effects at all. In fact, they experience positive effects. This is very similar to the research in this other book I love called Willpower, where the author studies the science behind this thing we call willpower, the ability to use discipline to push through pain. And the most interesting part of that book is that the researcher saw that when people believe willpower is finite, and like a battery that can be drained and then needs to be recharged, that is exactly what they experience. But that people who believe willpower was infinite actually experienced that, where they were able to keep going regardless of how much work they'd already done, because they knew that willpower was a trait that they had, not a battery that could be drained. You probably see where I'm going with this. Burnout is a scam. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy that only comes true when we believe it to be true. And to be clear, I'm not denying that some people really do experience negative health and negative mental health effects from working a lot. But my working theory on why that is that their view of work and belief in burnout is what is causing it, just like with stress or willpower. Exactly like what those researchers found to be the case, where these things become self-fulfilling prophecies. Not that there's some biological reason why humans can't work hard. I find that idea to be completely absurd, because if you think about it, our ancestors had to, by default, work much harder than the average person does today. Whether that was actually tending farms or foraging in the wilderness for survival, the wilderness is brutal, nature is brutal, and it requires huge amounts of hard work and discipline nonstop just to survive. So the idea that we as human beings have a built-in switch where we break down from hard work or disengage automatically if we do too much of it, while our work is literally typing at a laptop and thinking all day, is absurd to me. And I feel that I would know, given that I've been working intensely at this pace for over 6 years without taking any vacations, and I feel more energized and more excited today than when I started. The first major mindset shift is that burnout is a scam. We're not pieces of wax that have a finite burn before we burn out. In my view, being able to work for long periods of time on interesting work is a privilege. And when I tell people that, they often come back to me saying, Well, you're very lucky that you've found your passion and get to work on it all day long, but most people haven't and don't. So that brings us to the second lie that we're told about work, which is so destructive. The find your passion lie. Growing up, we're constantly told, find your passion, or if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life. And the assumption is that we're all born with passions around specific types of work, but that's a dangerous lie, because it leads us to believe that if we don't immediately and constantly feel happiness doing a form of work, then we must not be passionate about it, and it must be the wrong thing. It must be time to give up and do something else. For example, I'm the CEO of a software company. Was I born passionate about building software or building technology for local businesses more specifically? No. That would be absurd because software didn't even exist 100 years ago. So how could I possibly be genetically predisposed to being passionate about building technology companies? When I was first getting started in building my business, it was super painful most of the time. I had to learn skills from scratch like software engineering and marketing and team building, and at least 80% of my time was experiencing some form of pain, whether that was frustration or boredom or just self-doubt. And one of the things that helped me through it was not feeling entitled to feeling passion. I told myself that I would earn passion as I got better at the work. And over the years, that's turned out to be true. As I've built my skills in those areas for the past 12 years, I felt more and more passionate about the work that I do. Passion is something we feel once we get great at doing something. It's something we earn through work and mindset. It's not something that we find and that miraculously takes care of the feeling of work for us. There's one other part which I found really helpful for earning passion, and that is choosing to see the deep meaning in my work. That in and of itself is a choice. For example, when most people look at my company, owner.com, they see a software for restaurant marketing. The deep meaning to them isn't very obvious. They think to themselves, how could somebody be passionate enough about that to spend their life building it? But that isn't the full story, at least not to me. The full story is that this business was inspired by an experience that I had in building the first version for my mom 7 years ago, and seeing it literally change her life. I saw her go from this place where she was struggling to grow her business, as a single mom, constantly stressed about money, to then getting involved in helping her and building the first version for her, and seeing what happened when she finally had the right tools to succeed online. Seeing how everything in her life changed as she went from struggling and stressed to this place where she was excited again about her future and proud of what she'd built. I chose in that time to find meaning in this, to build a business around helping people like her. I didn't know exactly how I would do it yet. I was a 17-year-old high school dropout that knew nobody in the tech industry, but I did know why, and I did feel this meaning through this choice. I didn't have instant passion that made it nonstop fun all of a sudden for the next 7 years. It was quite the opposite. But I did choose to see a deeper meaning in my work, which made the work worth doing, however painful and uncomfortable it got. So after finding deep meaning in the work that I do, the next major mindset shift that I've found to be helpful is finding deep meaning in the person that I'm becoming through that work. Because the Adam, when I started this business 6 years ago at 17 years old, wasn't capable of building this business that we have today. At least not yet. He wasn't a great business leader. He wasn't a great communicator. He didn't have a world-class work ethic. He didn't have any relevant experience yet. But what he did have was this belief that he could become the type of person who could do those things if he worked hard enough. That belief came from this promise that I made myself when I dropped out of high school. I was so terrified that I was going to be left behind from not finishing high school and not going to college that I promised myself that I would spend 3 hours per day as a student of business, meaning 3 hours per day reading and listening to podcasts and taking courses. And I'll talk about that habit later in this video in part 3. But for now, the mindset part that I want to leave you with was best explained by Warren Buffett, the most successful investor of our time. I read this quote from Warren Buffett early on in my journey, where he was describing the best investment that he made. As I was reading, I was expecting it to be the best investment he made in one of any of the companies that made him billions of dollars. I thought he was about to say Geico, where he famously made tens of billions of dollars. But then he said, the best investment I've made is in myself. And he described how he took a course on public speaking from Dale Carnegie that changed his life, and how he reads for hours every day to continue that investment even in his 90s. The most successful investor of our time said that the best investment that we can make is improving ourselves. That really set this mindset for me of seeing myself as a lifelong student and making that an ongoing investment in my life, of constantly trying to learn from others and trying to find the lessons in even the most boring or painful of work. Because it made me realize that the people who we look up to now as geniuses weren't just born that way, but they put in decades of work as students of life to become that way. And some of that is through the learning habits I'll discuss later in this video, but some of it is through the act of working itself. Working, even if you don't feel qualified or capable. I haven't historically felt qualified to be doing what I'm doing. I still don't in many ways. I have imposter syndrome, and I have since the beginning, this feeling that I wasn't adequate and that I wasn't qualified. But the mindset shift that I had was that maybe it was good that I felt that way, because it would make me work extra hard on myself and on my work to develop the right traits and skills in myself over time. There's this quote I love from Alex Hormozy where he says, "The work works on you more than you work on it." And I found that to be so true and so powerful. There's all sorts of extremely boring parts of being a founder and CEO. I've done thousands and thousands of hours of one-on-one sales calls, of cold calling and emailing and being rejected hundreds of times by customers and investors and candidates over the past 6 years. I still spend more than 20 hours per week doing very boring stuff, which is a total grind. And even Jeff Bezos, as CEO of Amazon, one of the largest and most successful businesses in the world, said that there will always be a part of work which is like doing chores. No fun, but necessary. So rather than telling myself, I need to do this to make enough money to survive, as most people do, which actually would have been technically accurate, I told myself I get to do this to become a better version of myself on the other side, regardless of how uncomfortable it feels today. On this note, actually, uncomfortable is not a strong enough word for how painful building a business can feel sometimes. Elon Musk famously describes it as like chewing glass while staring into the abyss of death. There have been times where I thought I was going to lose it all, where everything was going wrong and we were about to run out of money, and it felt like years of work and sacrifice would be for nothing. And in those times, I found meaning in my faith and in my connection to God. That's another mindset shift that I found to be really empowering. To the non-religious people listening, if that's you, you're probably going to think that this sounds woo-woo and crazy, because I actually didn't grow up religious, so I get that point of view. I'm now a proud Christian, and I've found that my connection to God is one of the most important parts of my productivity and endurance. Here's why. Because in those times, which are darkest, where, for example, the pandemic caused us to lose all of our customers over the course of 2 weeks, who couldn't afford to pay us overnight, where we had to instantly do layoffs of the small team that we had, and we were down to just 2 people in the company. It looked like we were about to go bankrupt, and it would have been very easy and valid to feel like a victim in that moment. Like I had just spent 3 years of my life, and that it would soon be for nothing. Because of a pandemic, we would lose years of progress, and we were about to go bankrupt and be left with nothing. And at first, that was exactly how I instinctively felt. I did feel like a victim. I was asking myself, why did this happen to me? But I also felt this connection to God, which helped me through it. Because there's this lesson in Christianity that things aren't happening to us, they're happening for us. So rather than asking myself, why did this happen to me? I started asking myself, why did this happen for me? And that faith in God, that if I just didn't give up and continued executing, that I would be able to find a way through this, and that this would even serve me through helping me grow as a person, was exactly what I needed in that moment. I feel this purpose in everything that happens in life now, including the really painful and bad stuff, that it is God helping me grow through those trying circumstances, and I find that extremely powerful. Related to this, another mindset shift I adopted was embracing that building a business would be extremely painful. There's a reason why all of the best business leaders describe it this way, from Elon Musk as we covered, to even Steve Jobs. I joke as I'm advising new founders sometimes that it's kind of like a pain contest, where the one that can endure the most pain for the longest period of time wins. But I'm only half joking about that. And it's this shift of embracing that it's going to be painful and playing that game with pride that makes it inconceivable that I'll ever quit. Instead, I've realized that the more I grow through it, the bigger my tolerance for pain becomes. So again, it's this question of how is this happening for me? How can I use this when painful stuff happens, rather than feeling sorry for myself and asking, why did this have to happen to me? Before we move on to the changes in my environment that I found to be life-changing, there's one more part of the mindset that I want to cover, and that is my feeling of responsibility to the people that bet on me. Because when I feel pain on this journey, I remember all of the people who believed in me and who have helped me, and that is a huge driver of how I'm able to work such long hours and still feel good in spite of the pain. Because I feel that I would be nothing without those people, and I owe it to them to succeed, even more than myself. The way this feeds into my mindset is that I know that I can't control the market or the circumstances or whether bad stuff happens to us. Because in business, bad stuff happening is inevitable. But what I can control is the way that I show up every day. And a huge part of that is for the people who are counting on me, who sacrificed for me, who bet on me. When I don't feel like getting out of bed at 5 a.m. or doing 10 straight hours worth of meetings, which sometimes I have to do, or any of the other painful chore-like tasks, I remember all of the people who are counting on me and who sacrificed for me, and it is like a shot of infinite energy because I can't let them down. I'm extremely grateful for our investors, but it's not just them. I also mean our team. Our team has sacrificed so many great opportunities that they could have otherwise taken to join us in building Owner. And in many cases, they're making less money to do it. So I feel an obligation to them to show up in the best possible way every day. And it's not just our investors and our team, it's our customers who are counting on me to deliver a product which they are betting their business's success on. This was the case even in the early days, before we had a team or customers or investors. I felt this way about my parents, who had to sacrifice a lot to raise me. And it is thinking about them when it is so difficult that gives me like an infinite shot of energy whenever I need it, and inspiration and excitement again, because I remember that they are counting on me and that they bet me and I cannot let them down. The idea that their bet on me and sacrifice for me would be for nothing burns to even think about. So now that we've covered the most important parts of mindset, we're going to move on to part 2 of this video, the environment that I've set up to maximize productivity. So in terms of environment, the biggest decision I made starts with where I decided to live, which in my case is in the center of the tech world, in the San Francisco Bay Area. Where we choose to live is one of the most important decisions we make in life because it influences so much about the rest of our experience. And I think I have to tell you the story of when I first moved here to show you what I mean. Because when I first moved here 5 years ago, I moved into a 500 square foot studio apartment with 3 other dudes. It was like a hacker house, but house was too generous a term because it was a studio apartment. I slept on the floor of the closet in the studio apartment with a blow-up mattress that I literally could not get up to leave the room without picking the mattress up off the floor and pinning it against the wall to be able to open the door. And even in that environment, I was super happy and super productive. It wasn't a perfect environment for productivity yet, but it taught me one of the most important things about the place that I live. Because unlike where I'd grown up in LA, the people in my new environment had similar goals and similar values to me. So I no longer felt like a freak for spending all of my time focused on my work. They were all in the tech industry and they were all in startups and they all did the same thing. They were the same type of weird and ambitious that I was. So even though I was sleeping on the floor and sharing a studio apartment with 3 guys, it was the first time where I felt it was normal to work so hard and dream big in this way. And that came from finally getting around people who had similar values and similar goals. I didn't even care about my personal living arrangements being janky at the time. I don't think I would have gotten that mindset shift early if I just stayed where I grew up in LA. Not that there aren't hardworking people in LA, there definitely are, but it's not so normalized and intense in the way that it is in the startup world of the San Francisco Bay Area. There's this saying you might have heard that you become the average of the people you spend the most time with. And I've found that to be absolutely true, which is why one of the most important parts of my environment is being careful about the people that I spend my time with. I do not tolerate toxic friends at all. That's not to say that everybody I'm friends with has to be ahead of me in the business world, because I've got many friends who are earlier in their journey or who have different goals from me, and I value them too. But I do filter very carefully with this criteria and asking myself, is this person helping me become and live as the best version of myself? And I do not spend time with people who are toxic or who make me feel badly about the way that I want to spend my time. I've even had to cut family off for this reason. Because when I first started living with such intentionality and intensity towards my work, I had cousins that I was close to and friends I was close to who were constantly making these weird comments about it to me. They would call me things like money bags and say stuff like, too cool to spend time with us now, whenever I chose to work instead of going to hang out with them. And it would make me feel weird and guilty. And sometimes I would cave in and then not do the work that I wanted to do because I thought that I was at risk of losing them. But when I realized that they were influencing me in the wrong direction from where I wanted to go, I realized that I had no choice but to cut those people off if I wanted to continue to grow. Because as painful as it was to do, it was extremely impactful to maximize my success and my happiness. By the way, I think there's a way to achieve this mindset shift virtually through being very intentional about the content you consume. You don't need friends like Sam Altman to learn from geniuses, even him, or to get effective mentorship from them. I'm going to talk about the habit that I have later in this video for picking up those virtual mentors. But first, we need to cover the biggest environmental unlocks for major productivity. The next one is prioritizing sleep. I do that through always ensuring that I get enough of it and that I have a great environment to sleep in. Meaning, I sleep in a room which is pitch black, no lights, about 65 degrees, which many studies suggest is the optimal temperature for sleep, and I also sleep wearing earplugs for complete silence. My mattress is also pretty major. When I realized the importance of sleep and that I was going to spend a third of my life doing it, I decided to go all in and buy the most expensive mattress that money can buy, at least that I know of. It's $6,000 from Tempur-Pedic, top of the line, and I think it is the single most expensive thing that I physically own. And I can confirm that it has made a huge difference to my sleep quality and to the excitement that I feel about going to sleep early every night. It's not as big as ensuring that my sleep hours are consistent and in complete darkness and silent, but definitely helps a lot. I'm usually in bed reading by about 8:30 p.m. and asleep by 9:30 p.m. And I think part of what makes that easy for me is that I feel so excited to lie on my cloud of a mattress. And I'm not saying that I need a $6,000 mattress to be productive. I was actually used to sleeping on that $200 air mattress thing in the closet, or before that, really old, stiff, janky mattresses. But I am saying that it's worth upgrading to a decent quality mattress as soon as possible because it makes sleep better and the act of going to sleep more fun because it's that much more comfy. By the way, that brings me to the next environmental hack. I mentioned that I moved here 5 years ago and lived in a studio apartment with 3 other dudes. I actually still live in a studio apartment 5 years later, and it's not because I can't afford a larger place. I'm fortunate to be able to now, but because I find the small, highly focused space to be really helpful for productivity. My apartment has the exact things that I need in life. That's it. It's very minimalist. It's a desk, which you see behind me, a chair, a stool for eating, a sofa for meditating on, and a bed to go to sleep on. You'll notice that I didn't say a television. That's a huge part of the way that I'm able to work so much while still sleeping 7 to 8 hours every night. Because the average person these days spends more than 3 hours a day watching TV. Getting to spend that time instead being productive, whether that's working or reading or working out, is a huge advantage for time management, obviously, and it compounds over time. On this note, it's no secret that social media is a productivity killer. I put it into the same category of television. So I refuse to have any of the apps installed on my phone. No Instagram, no Twitter, no Facebook. On the rare occasions that I have something to post, a few times per year, I either do it from logging in on my web browser on my laptop computer, which you see behind me, or install it for a few minutes to post on my phone, and then I immediately remove it. That way, I don't have any temptation to check them. Speaking of not having temptation to check things, I also keep my phone locked away in a drawer while I work, which is far away from my computer, so I don't randomly pull it out when I'm feeling stuck and then break my focus and concentration. I find it really helpful to, while I'm working on my laptop, keeping my peripheral vision completely free of distractions, like a phone. So while I work at my desk, I've positioned it so I have nothing to stare at except for an empty wall, my meditation sofa, and my laptop screen where the work is getting done. I also am very OCD about keeping my desktop completely clear of icons and not having more than 3 tabs open at once at the absolute most, but ideally just one, so that I can singularly focus on the thing that needs to get done. I also have all notifications off on my phone, not even for phone calls or text messages. The people that are close to me know that if they absolutely need to reach me, they can call a few times straight to get through my do not disturb and interrupt me, but that almost never happens. We're talking a few times a year. My goal with turning off notifications on my phone and computer was to make it easier to focus, and it has been a total game changer, because instead of constantly reacting to what people text me or what apps notify me all day long, it makes it so that I can be proactive rather than reactive about using my time in the most productive possible way. I also create complete silence when I'm not in meetings working. This might just be a weird Adam thing, but I find it much easier to focus for hours at a time when I'm in complete silence. When there's sirens and noise in the hallway and city noises and leaf blowers, it takes effort for me to tune those things out and to stay in flow focused for hours at a time. So not only did I pick a very quiet apartment to live in, very intentionally, with the quietest possible surroundings, but I also wear earplugs and noise canceling headphones on top of them when I work, so that not even the sound of a gunshot would faze me. And I'm not even joking. I bet if a gun was fired in my neighborhood, I would hardly hear it. And those are the key parts of my environment for productivity. Before we move on to part 3, the habits and biohacks that I use as tools to stay productive and how I optimize my body, I want to summarize the key parts of my environmental design for you. The first part is that I relocated to the city that I find most inspiring to live in. And that move, compared with being very intentional about the people I surround myself with, has raised my standards massively in terms of the discipline and productivity that I expect from myself. I don't spend time with people who are in any way toxic or who I don't admire, and I keep a small studio apartment to sleep and work in because I find it to be so focusing. Everything in here is dedicated to productivity. I don't have a TV. I don't have a place to have people over. I keep things very neat so that I don't have the stress of clutter and can just stay focused on the work. I picked a super quiet apartment and work in complete silence with noise canceling headphones and earplugs on when I'm not on calls so that I can stay laser focused on the work that needs to get done. So that brings us to part 3, the habits and biohacks that I use to maximize my productivity. We'll start with the biohacks, meaning the ways that I optimize my body to maximize productivity. I view startups as the Olympics of business. And just like an Olympian who wants to win a gold medal, I feel that I need to be very intentional, not just with my training, aka the work that I do, but with optimizing my body to perform at its best during that training. So as you'll see, I am very disciplined with how I fuel and condition my body. And I'm not saying this is a prerequisite for success. I know all about how Warren Buffett lives on McDonald's and Coca-Cola and still crushes it in business. But I am saying that for me, this maximizes my productivity. I typically wake up around 5 a.m. Some days I'll have about 100 milligrams of caffeine worth of coffee, about 90 minutes after waking, and then again about 5 hours after that. I usually pair it with 200 milligrams of L-theanine so that it doesn't lead to jitters or anxiety and is more smooth energy. But I don't caffeinate every day because I don't want to build dependency on caffeine. Sometimes I just go with herbal tea in the morning. I'm 24 years old, by the way, and have not had a sip of alcohol or smoked weed in 8 years. Staying away from that stuff is really important to my productivity. I actually did experiment with both early in my teens, but I just don't think they're worth it at all. And all of the research suggests that they are a really, really bad idea for long-term productivity and success. I saw a lot of people in my life growing up who were addicts, and that made me really not want to go down that road myself, so I just don't touch it. And then I don't eat any food at all until about 11 a.m. at the earliest. Then I'm typically done eating by about 5 p.m. I've found that fasting in the morning makes me mentally sharper and makes it easier to focus. And that fasting in the evening makes my sleep quality better. When I do start eating at 11, I typically eat one large meal and then the second large meal closer to the end of my window. The large meal is a big salad of vegetables, and it's also got 95 grams of protein. That's multiple servings of chicken, turkey, and eggs that I eat throughout the day. Overall, I get about 2,300 calories in per day, but sometimes it's more and sometimes it's less depending on the fitness goal that I have at the time. I just try and make sure that they're all organic foods to minimize the environmental toxins from pesticides entering my body and to maximize the quality of energy that I'm getting. My diet is nutritionally balanced, but there's a few things that I found that I have to supplement to stay in optimal range. So I do take omega-3s every day and vitamin D supplements when I first break my fast. And they're hard to get in because I don't eat fish or red meat. I stay away from fish because of the heavy metal risks. And with red meat, I just don't really like the taste or saturated fat. I also drink Athletic Greens as a multivitamin at the end of my eating window, just to make sure that I'm getting the full range of micronutrients every day. I've experimented with lots of different diets, and I found that my body feels best and performs best on this diet and schedule. Sometimes I'll order from restaurants that use the technology that my company built as a way to continue to improve the product. But I'll only order things which fit into my macronutrient and micronutrient goals for the day. Those tend to be dishes with vegetables, lean protein, and healthy fats. That's it. Believe it or not, it's actually easy to find the dishes on pretty much every restaurant's menu that falls into that pretty strict criteria when you're trained to look for it and make those mental calculations about what is nutritionally in items. My diet is super strict, but I almost never can't make it work at restaurants. In cases where I go out to dinner, I just budget calories accordingly by eating less earlier in the day or fasting, and then strategically order the items that are going to make up my nutritional breakdown. I'll make a whole video about how I've optimized my diet for maximum levels of focus and energy, so subscribe if you're interested in that. But for now, I will give you the quick summary of it. I wore a device in my arm for a week to create a diet which kept my blood sugar levels stable. It's called a continuous glucose monitor. And I wore it because I found that the way that I ate affected the way I was able to focus. It's why I don't eat grains or processed food or refined sugar or any of the stuff which spikes my blood sugar. I found that keeping that level stable makes it much easier for me to stay focused for long periods of time and make high quality decisions. And I found that the best diet for me was pretty much just vegetables, healthy fats, blueberries, and lean protein. That's it, so that's what I eat. I've been logging my food in MyFitnessPal for more than 5 years now, so I can estimate pretty closely the nutritional impact of all of the foods that I eat, even when I'm out at a restaurant. Believe it or not, I used to be a fat kid and I ate horribly, to the point where my doctor told me that I was going to be diabetic unless something changed, because I was almost obese in terms of my BMI. And the reason for that was I was eating candy and frozen yogurt and Smuckers and Gushers and fruit roll-ups and cookies every single day. And it led to this place where I hated how I looked going into middle school. I was bullied for it. And I just remember feeling so disgusted with myself that I still remember that pain, and it makes it easy to be disciplined now. Looks aside, by the way, ever since keeping a super healthy and strict diet, I've noticed a huge difference in my energy levels and mental clarity. So I never, ever eat those foods anymore. I've probably had like 5 desserts in the past 7 years, no exaggeration. I also get full panels of blood work done 3 to 4 times a year to check that my nutritional levels are in optimal range for performance. And this might sound paranoid, but it gives me peace of mind. I also get a full body MRI every year in place of my annual physical, which all the studies suggest is a waste of time, so that I have peace of mind that my body is internally doing well. And that's for another time. I'll go into why I do that more thoroughly in another video. But for now, those are my biohacks and wellness habits, and they're the foundation for maximizing my energy and focus throughout the day. But that is just the foundation. Here's how I build on it with my work habits. The plan for my day always starts the night before, where I ask myself, what are the 3 most important things that I need to get done tomorrow? Then I number them 1, 2, 3 and put them on my list. And then I list everything else beneath them that I also need to get done the next day. I try hard not to work on anything that isn't a top 3 priority until I've gotten those top 3 things done, so that I always push the most important things forward. Because if I don't prioritize like that, there's this huge temptation to do the things that are easy, but that don't really make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. And while those things feel good and release more dopamine as I check more and more items off the list, I've realized that it makes a much bigger impact to just make progress on the 3 highest leverage things than to get 20 of the smaller things done. And as I'm planning my day, I also go through my to-do list in Asana and I write out the very specific actions that I need to accomplish each day and the links to things, so that as I'm getting stuff done the next day, it doesn't require energy to initiate tasks, meaning I don't have to figure out what to do and then search for the file and then open it up. That is a series of steps for each task that I avoid by planning it out the day before. And that way I'm just jumping right into the task, and it is one of the most underrated productivity hacks I've found. So that's the day before. Then the day of, I wake up usually around 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. so that I can almost always wake up before my alarm, given that my body's used to it now. Because I've found that I feel less anxious if I naturally wake up than if I get jolted awake by a screeching alarm. Then I typically put a podcast or audiobook on first thing in the morning to begin feeding my mind and drink water. I'll then shave, shower, get myself dressed. I'll pour myself the coffee on caffeine days so that I have it. I can start sipping it about 90 minutes after the time that I woke up. I hold off on drinking coffee immediately after waking up so that I give my body time to clear the chemicals in my brain from sleep and to hydrate with water. I learned from Dr. Andrew Huberman that it prevents an afternoon energy crash, and he was totally right about that, to just delay the caffeine intake. I then focus on the number 1 most important thing on my list, typically from about 6:15 a.m. to 8 a.m. I intentionally, though, leave the 6 hours between 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. completely unstructured, or at least as much as possible, so that I can use them as I need to make progress on my top 3 priorities. I don't schedule calls until 11 a.m. unless there's a very, very important reason to do it early, and that reason is in my top 3 priorities for the day. That gives me the first 5 hours or so of the day uninterrupted to focus on the most important things. I'll take a few breaks between 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. to get sun on a 10-minute neighborhood walk or to meditate for 20 minutes. I found both to be calming and helpful. I'll eventually make a video about the meditation practice that I found works best after trying out like 7 different ones over the past 7 years. So click subscribe below if you're interested in that video. Anyway, I usually schedule my meetings from about 11 to 5 p.m. 4 days a week. I try not to schedule anything on the other 3 days so that I have as much time and space to think, to write, and to do deep work, which is related to my top priorities at any given point. Because I found that context switching from meetings to deep work is just derailing and not the best strategy. So I leave myself huge blocks of time unscheduled to think and do deep work. If I make enough progress on my top 3 priorities on any given day, I'll also go to the gym early in the morning if I'm able to do it by that slot. But usually I'll have to wait until after my last call is over to go to the gym for 90 minutes so that I can work out when my mind is tired, but my body is fresh. And that means that that time when my mind is sharpest at the beginning of the day is just used to make as much progress in my work as possible. And then when I mentally feel tired from that point, I work out. I'm not strict about the timing of my workout because I prioritize my work, but I am strict about holding myself accountable to working out at least 6 days a week. I've found that I generally feel more energized and good when I work out most days of the week. I do lift weights about 6 to 7 days a week, and then I do cardio another 6 to 7 days a week. During my cardio sessions, I often schedule calls or walking meetings so that I'm able to make progress on work-related stuff and make use of that time which would otherwise be dead. Speaking of making use of time which would otherwise be dead, I almost always listen to podcasts in the car rather than music so that I can continue making progress on the work stuff and feeding my mind with quality content even in time which wouldn't otherwise be productive. This has been a huge unlock for me, and it hits on a bigger theme which has been the most transformative to my life. The theme of self-education. That's the habit which has most changed my life. Constantly working to learn from other people through content. And I wasn't prepared for just how much it would change my life, because it allows me to take years worth of lessons from other people's lives and to learn them in just a few hours of studying that book or listening to that podcast myself. There's this great quote I love that embodies this perfectly. And it goes something like, wise men learn from their own mistakes, but wiser men learn from the mistakes of others. Because learning from the mistakes and experiences of others makes it so that the whole process of learning goes so much faster, and it helps me avoid making the same mistakes myself. I remember shortly after I dropped out of high school in 10th grade, I was reading my way through every popular business book in existence. I was just looking for the lists and crushing them at a rate of about one book every 2 days. And eventually, I came across a book that totally changed my life. It was this book 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters. And that was my first exposure into the world of startups. It was how I learned about the real tech world and the venture ecosystem. And it gave me all of these counterintuitive insights on business that I'd never considered before. This idea of starting with a small market strategically, or the importance of having a cult-like team. I loved it so much that over the next 4 years, I read it cover to cover like 17 different times. And a few years later, I was interviewed by Entrepreneur Magazine, and the journalist offhandedly asked me something like, "What's your favorite book, Adam?" And I told him, 0 to 1, hands down, by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters. I've read that book like 14 times. So unbeknownst to me, he went with that as a headline. Adam Guild has read this book 14 times, and the article went extremely viral. It ended up getting hundreds of social shares, tens of thousands of reads, and made its way to Peter Thiel and Blake Masters. That article actually got me fast-tracked to the finals of the Thiel Fellowship interviews that year. And as awesome as that lucky break was, to be invited to the Thiel Fellowship interviews, this grant of $100,000, it's a tiny fraction of the value that I've gotten from this habit overall, just to give you an idea. Because as grateful as I am for this, it is hard to understate how powerful this habit is. That means that more than 20% of the time that I spend working is time spent learning how to better work and learning how to better view the world. I plan on sharing some of the most impactful books and lessons I've learned from tens of thousands of hours of doing this soon. So if you're interested in video breakdowns of the books that have most changed my life, then click that subscribe button down below to make sure you don't miss out those videos when they get posted. There's one other thing worth calling out. One of the most common questions I get from people that are first starting out is, who are your mentors? And over the past 5 years, I've been blessed to become friends with and learn from some of the most successful people in our industry. But even so, I am not exaggerating when I say that I've learned at least 4 times more from reading books and listening to podcasts and consuming content than even from getting to know some of the most successful people in the world. When successful people create great content, it is perfectly structured for learning. And in each of those cases, those two have spent thousands of hours creating huge amounts of valuable content with all of the context, which meant that even knowing them and having them as investors, I got way more of their time with clearer thinking by being willing to study their work independently versus needing to rely on them one-on-one to answer my questions in that format. That's actually a huge part of my motivation for creating this channel. I want to be able to mentor every person in my company and give them some of the lessons that I've learned along the way that'll help them execute in their roles better. But I can't do it one-on-one. So I figured that if I created videos that share my biggest learnings on this journey, that I can achieve that mentorship in my company across our team of over 100 people now. And if you want to continue learning from my experiences, then click that subscribe button down below, because I've got some really important videos coming soon about the biggest lessons that I've learned in startups, in business, and the books which have most changed my life. Take care. Bye.